Hi, I'm Angela Wolf, fashion designer and online instructor, and in this season of It's So Easy, I'm going to be sewing skirts. In this particular lesson, we're going to sew a simple A-line skirt. It's really important what fabric you pick out. Look at these three versions. A faux suede, we have a tweed, and that's a linen blend. It has a totally different look, or a wool. So let's get started. When you first pick out a simple pattern, a simple skirt pattern, this is what I call a semi-A-line because it's not completely like an A, but it kind of goes around. So the first thing you want to do, pick your pattern. Try to have one with just two seams. That makes it really easy. You could have a center and a back, but this one just has two side seams, two different waistband options, one that's a facing. A facing you have to picture is inside the waistband, so it gives a nice clean finish along the top. Or sometimes they have a waistband. There are many more options which you'll see the rest of this season, but we're just going to start with the basics. So the first thing you need to do is grab your tape measure. You're going to measure yourself and compare it to the pattern. Now you might have noticed on many patterns there's this grid in the back that's really small. You need binoculars to see. This tells you how much fabric to buy, what size. There's two different things, general measurements and actual measurements. General measurements are the general measurements that every pattern designer uses to design their patterns. Exact measurements means that's the exact measurement of the pattern. So if you cut out your pattern from wherever you get it, there's usually an area here. This is the waist, and this signifies the hip area. This is on all patterns. So if you look through this area here, this is obviously the waist. If you look at this measurement, it tells you the exact waist measurement. It tells you the exact hip measurement, meaning if you want a skirt that's completely fitted with no ease, ease means you have a little bit of room to move around, then you want to check this measurement. So let's just say you have a 40-inch waist and you want to have 1 inch of ease. You'd go through here and find a size that it's at least 41 inches. So take your measurements and just real quick, you just bend your waist. That's your natural waist. I know many of us think our waist is lower, but that's your waist. And then you're going to measure your hip. And your hip is at the fullest part of your body, down here. It's usually about 6 inches below your waist, but we're all made different. So yours might be more and it might be less. The next thing you want to measure is from your waistline to the hem. Now, just because a skirt becomes this length in the pattern doesn't mean you have to cut it that length. This particular skirt has two different options of length. So you can just measure from the waist down, and however long you want that skirt, that's where you can stop it at. So that's the general pick of the pattern. So choose your size. If you're unsure about what size to pick, pick a size up from your waist so you have room to move around. Decide which waistband you want. I'm actually, for this one, just going to go with a simple waistband. And you'll see how easy this is to insert. There's usually, now this isn't on every pattern, so you might want to add it in case it doesn't show up that way. 2 pieces of interfacing. And this is for the zipper area, which you'll see in just a moment. As far as zippers are concerned, you have a few options. A hidden zipper, meaning that you can't see it. At least it's kind of hidden. And then there's just a standard zipper. So the other thing you need is for the hem, you can either use a serger, use it with a blind hem, or I brought some hem tape. You can also use lace. A lot of times they come in packages. And so that's all we need to get started. So let's go to the sewing machine, and I want to start by sewing the zipper in, but first I want to show you right here on this skirt. On the wrong side of each one, I have already gone and pressed on my stabilizer. This is a fusible knit, just like this. It has just a little bit of stretch. What I did is I placed this on here, and when I pressed it, I took the iron and just pressed and lifted and pressed and lifted. Don't go like this. I didn't think you needed to watch that, so I went ahead and pressed that in. Then I went and serged the edges. If you don't have a serger, you can use an overlock stitch on your sewing machine or a binding. There are many options. This is just an easy one if you have a serger. And why did I do that? Because now I can sew this seam, press it open, and it's already serged. Notice that I did not serge the waistband, and I did not serge the hem area yet. That comes later. So now that I have both of my sides with my zipper pressed and ready to go, let's go sew. So start by taking your first piece of fabric. Usually your zipper opens on the left area, but remember, or left side I should say, but remember it's your skirt. If you feel it's easier to open on the right side, it's your choice. So I have a zipper foot here. I'm just gonna go to a standard straight stitch. And if you follow closely, there's a lot of flipping that goes on here. Take your zipper and flip it over. So your tab is down. On the back side is my interfacing here. And I'm just gonna line this up. Whatever your seam allowance is, that's what you want to line up with the edge of your teeth right here. So I believe this pattern is 1/2 inch. Some patterns are 5/8 of an inch, so check yours. And notice how the zipper coil is opening right underneath that foot. And I'm just gonna stitch on down. You really don't need pins for this. Now, depending on how long your zipper is, you would have a notch on the side for where you should stop, or you definitely need to stop 1 inch before you get to the end here. Okay, that's one side. Looks great. Now let's grab our other piece of fabric. Okay, again, keep these all up here. This is the side that has the interfacing on the back. Again, this is the side that had it. Now, take your zipper. Sometimes I like to zip this up just to make sure that it looks nice, but also to make sure I don't get confused, because this is gonna go on the fabric ending up like this. It's very easy to get confused once it's open, and you'll see why. I have that, I'm holding that in place, and now flip this whole thing over. You can see there's a lot of flipping that goes on here, so this is how this side of the zipper is gonna get sewn on. So the next thing I need to do is just switch my zipper to the other side. Depending on what zipper foot you have, you might have to do the same thing. Just get that down there. All right. And again, just start stitching. There's really no need to back stitch at the top because that's going to be in your waistband, so why waste the time? And go ahead and stitch down. If you notice, one thing that I'm doing is I'm just making sure that the fabric and the zipper teeth move together, and that will help so you don't have puckers in your zipper. If you've ever had puckers, now you know what that's from. So I'm just gonna stitch down. And let's see what we have. One thing that I do like to do, I wanna show you something here. See how this stitch is just 2 stitches past this side? Usually I'll put a little snip or a chalk or something like that to make sure those are exactly perfect. So it looks like I need 2 more stitches on this right-hand side and then I'm good. But if you snip it in the first place, then you don't have to go back and do this. The reason being is when you finish sewing that side seam, just switch the side on my zipper foot here. The reason being is when we sew that side seam closed, that you don't want to have a little hole at the bottom of your zipper. So I just need like 2 more stitches here. And we should be good. Okay, so the next step, because your whole side is open right here, let me get my waistband out of the way. You're gonna zip up your zipper, and now we need to close the bottom of that seam. So go ahead and leave on your zipper foot to start with. And you just wanna get your fabric all lined up. And this is the zipper on the far right side. Switch your zipper foot, just like this. Now, here's a little trick. If your machine will do this, if you can move your needle over just a little bit. So usually it's if you hit the width, plus or minus. Every machine is a little bit different, so just check yours. And now that needle is going right next to my zipper where I just stitched. I'm starting about 1/4 inch above where I stopped on both sides of the zipper. Push this out of the way and just stitch down just a little bit. And I'll just show you this part here. See how it started right above the zipper and stitch down? The next thing I'm gonna do is just switch to my standard zipper, my standard foot, not my zipper. Slide this back under. Actually, I'm going to just make my stitch back to the center. I find that the most comfortable to stitch. It's what I'm used to. All right, put your needle down to make sure you're getting right back into where you just stopped that stitch. Looks pretty good. Back stitch, and then stitch all the way down. Now here's a tip for you. Depending on how thick your fabric is, you might want to change your stitch length to a 3.0 or 3.5. I'm changing it to a 3.5. This is a little bit thicker fabric, so it really depends on your fabric, but you just don't want a whole bunch of little stitches in your seam. And my first side is finished. So the next thing I will do is press that, but first I'm going to go ahead and stitch the other side. And again, line up your hem, line up your side seam. If you have any notches, I snip my notches like this so I can match those up. Go ahead and just place that under your foot. You really don't need pins for this. And I'm going to stitch this all the way down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and finish sewing the seam. We're going to press both seam allowances open, and I'll meet you back here to sew on the waistband and finish the hem.